Hey, it's David. Welcome to the latest episode of Look Both Ways with David and Wes. This time we spent a lot of time talking about street parking, and Wes somehow managed to incorporate Taylor Swift into his policy recommendation in a way that almost makes sense. You'll also hear me expound on the awesomeness of mini cars, and the two of us debate the future of transit. If you enjoyed the podcast, maybe tell a friend about it. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hello, and welcome to Look Both Ways with David and Wes, pragmatic conversations about all things transportation. I am David Zipper, and as always, I am joined by Wes Marshall, and we are recording live via live stream, but you can always find our episodes on your favorite podcast platform or watch them later on YouTube. So today we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of stuff, including some new twists and turns with Chicago's parking meter saga. But first, Wes, I have a question for you.
All right.
Everything good in Denver, by the way?
Yeah, everything's good. Things are good. The weather's better than yours, I think.
Well, weather pretty much anywhere is better than ours in DC. It's been like 9 days below freezing, and Mother Nature is not melting the ice off of the sidewalk, which is sort of DC government strategy for keeping things walkable. Not working so well. But I don't want to talk about sidewalks. I want to talk about Amtrak. I thought I'd stir the pot a little bit because not long ago, I want to ask specifically about quiet cars on Amtrak. Do you take the quiet car, Wes?
There's not much Amtrak that's useful for me here in Denver, so I don't use it all that often as much as I kind of would like to. Like, you know,
you grew up in
Boston,
corridor, right? You've taken Amtrak in the Northeast corridor, right?
Yeah, I have taken Amtrak.
So, well, my question is
it's been a while though.
It's been a while. Well, you can weigh, if it's theoretical, that can work too. But one thing that seems to get people always fired up is the idea of the quiet car. You ever been in the quiet car?
Yeah.
Because I like if you so much as like say 10 words to the person next to you, someone's going to be shushing you. Some people think that is, patronizing and awful. Some people like it. A little while ago, I was in the quiet car and a guy was listening on headphones to Elton John's Rocket Man. And every now and then he'd just belt out, "It's going to be a long, long time." And people would start cracking up and nobody actually told him to say anything. We all stood down. It was sort of unusual. But people have very strong feelings on the quiet car. And I'm curious what you think about the idea of setting aside a single car on train service for those who don't want to hear anybody talking or loud noises.
I'm good with it, but at the other end of the spectrum, I would kind of like to have a party car as well. So you have your choice. You could have either end or something more normal in the middle.
A party car. It sounds like you had a particular experience when you were in college, maybe, that you want to tell us about?
No, but I've been on ones that are much more fun. And I've heard of this being a thing in Europe where there are kind of the bar cars and there are things like that are like even the ones I've seen. Was it Sweden that has like a car with like a playground on it for kids to kind of jump around and do stuff like that? So, I mean, I think, if it's a train that's long enough, like having those sort of specialty things would make it more fun for various segments of the population and more useful to take as real transportation.
I kind of agree with you. I don't think we do that in the U.S. pretty much at all, except for the quiet car. It's all I can think of.
The library car is basically
the library car. It's actually fair because everyone does like librarians shushing one another. But it'd be kind of cool. Like, I find it sort of intriguing. It reminds me, I think we may have talked about a previous episode at some point that sometimes some countries have subway cars that are for women only. Like I think Mexico City has that, if I'm not mistaken. That's a little different. Now we're talking about sort of segmenting people by preferences as opposed to safety, which just strikes me as kind of cool. So I'm kind of with you. I think I'm in favor of the quiet car because I like quiet, but I think you're right that a party car could be, why not have both? In other words, to quote the meme.
Yeah, and there are some, I've never actually done this myself because it takes a lot longer than I often have time for. But like when people go to like the NACTO conference, like the North American City Transportation Official ones, I've
Yeah.
heard of people meeting in some other city to take like Amtrak, like a bunch of transportation people to take the train to that city where the conference actually is together and to kind of have fun and hang out and talk transportation. So that's not something haven't done yet, but I can imagine that being fun. So having cars that, speak to different, preferences makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think maybe we can leave it there. In favor of the quiet car, also in favor of partying in trains and public transportation. When
but then if you're done partying, you can go to the quiet car. Maybe
take a snooze and then go back in the action, kind of like it's Saturnalia or something.
Yeah.
Probably the first reference of Saturnalia on Look Both Ways, but maybe there'll be a second. Let's go on to Word on the Street. This is the segment of the podcast where we always discuss a transportation issue in the news. And the last couple of weeks, there's been some updates to a drama that's been going on for like 20 years in Chicago about the privatization of parking meters there. And we have some thoughts. So Wes, why don't you explain what's going on?
So you might have heard the news last week that Chicago's parking meters are being resold. The final figures have not been disclosed, but it's for upwards of like $3 billion. And that number is kind of based on what the city was offered to buy them back at. So for those that don't know, so back in 2008, I think it was, Chicago leased its 36,000 parking meters to a private consortium. So it was called like Chicago Parking Meters LLC. It was led by Morgan Stanley, and I think there was a 25% stake by Abu Dhabi, like the sovereign wealth fund of Abu Dhabi. And they got at the time like $1.15 billion.
The city got $1.15 billion.
Yeah, so it's worth noting that they did not sell them. They leased them for a period of 75 years. And the deal was essentially rushed through city council with very little review, and largely to plug the short-term budget crisis they were having. This is during the Great Recession that was happening at the time. And the city, by doing this, they gave up future meter revenue, which at the time was like $22 million per year. And they also lost control over pricing and policy stuff related to the meters. And, one of the many things I learned from Donald Shoup was that our street parking is severely underpriced in terms of its market rate.
Donald Shoup being the late professor at UCLA.
Exactly.
He makes regular appearances in the podcast, I feel like.
The parking guru. So I'm guessing that this consortium knew the same thing, and they quickly jacked up the cost to park. They doubled the cost in many parts of the city. They extended the hours. They extended it to Sundays. And I think within a year, they had tripled the amount of money that was coming in from the parking. And, they expected to, make something like $10 billion over the lifetime of the deal. But last I heard is they recouped their entire $1.15 billion within the first 11 years. Like they've already done that. And now they've sold the meters off to some other group that's undisclosed yet. So I don't know. What do you think about all this? I know you know the story. You've read a lot of the same stuff I have, but this is it's such an interesting story, especially with sort of the compensation clauses. We can talk about that too, but it's I don't know. There's a lot going on there.
There is a lot going on. And for those who are curious about this saga, I recommend reading a book called Paved Paradise by the journalist Henry Graybar, which is a book all about parking and has a really interesting chapter about this particular saga in Chicago over the parking meters. And I think it's worth making sure it's clear, because this to me is the part that really screwed over Chicago more than the foregone money. It's the inability to remove any parking meters without paying a ton of money to the consortium that now leases them. So if you want to do open streets, which means basically having no street parking for a day or two, you got to pay a lot of money. If you want to build a new bike lane that would require removing a row of parking meters, you got to pay a whole lot of money to the consortium, and Chicago can't really afford it. So apparently but this is like an infamous deal. I think that, you look at like as it's seen widely in Chicago and outside of Chicago as being one of the worst sort of like city privatization attempts in history. Like I've heard estimates that Chicago left $1 billion plus on the table. The Mayor Johnson of Chicago looked into potentially like buying back all the parking meters and decided not to. So just recently, so it's seen as a disaster. I gotta say though, Wes, I actually am. I have a bit of a different view based on what I've heard about it from some inside sources and what I've seen. I don't think it's all downside what happened. And I'll give you a couple of reasons why. Number one, the price of parking went up a lot after privatization. Why did that happen? Because the city couldn't really determine the cost of pricing anymore. So basically, because you had this private consortium controlling the cost of a meter, they could do what government really struggled to do, which is charge closer to the actual market rate for street pricing. And there's an argument that this could only have happened with a deal like this. And that as good chupistas, that is a step in the right direction. So I think that is a pretty significant silver lining. And the other interesting sort of anecdote that I have about this is I was talking with a guy who's involved with infrastructure finance on Wall Street recently, and he knows very well the people who did the deal with Morgan Stanley to do this sort of like long-term lease. And he's like, David, if they could do it over again, they never would have done it. There's this idea that they just fleeced the city. The internal rate of revenue or the return is not high. And everyone thinks that these guys are cheats, which is not how Morgan Stanley wants to be perceived. So this is actually not necessarily a deal where, from everything I can see, the investors would absolutely do it again. Now, perhaps the guy is lying. He just wants people to think that. It's entirely possible. I kind of doubt it given the context of the conversation, but I'm not sure this is it's entirely the sort of like the simple narrative of Wall Street fleecing the city, which in every possible way got screwed, which is how people sort of understand it.
Yeah, the quote I heard from the current mayor is he called it the worst deal in the history of municipal finance. And I mean, it's hard to agree with the person you were talking to. Like, I mean, the fact that they made their money back in 11 years and then after that they resold it for $3 billion.
But that they sold it 20 years later for like 2.6 times. Well, the question is, would they have made more money just putting the money in the stock market, Wes? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm not sure they'd make a whole lot more through this. So
you were talking about that compensation clause they have. So they have to, the city has to
That's the really, really bad part.
Yeah.
That's the part
like you said, the protected bike lane, parklets, or like whatever they're doing. And like the numbers I was reading, on average, the city is paying them an extra $20 million per year to fulfill that obligation, which is the same amount of money they were making from the parking meters in the first place.
No, that's the part that to me is the worst of all of this, is just the shackles that are placed on city government whenever it wants to do something a little bit better with the streets. And that just seems like it's terrible. And I wonder if there could have been some way to avoid that back in the way where they did the deal. But I don't know. I mean, do you not think there's some value in being able to price parking closer to the market rate?
No, I agree with you. Like, some good stuff has come out of it. Like, it's not only the fact that they're able to price at a market rate, but they also had a huge handicap placard problem. And this cleaned that up significantly, especially around City Hall. And that's something that I believe Henry talks about in his book as well. But I guess my question for you here is, like, if you're the city, like, what would you do? Like, how would you try to
now?
Now. Like, I mean, I know, like, Game Klein tried to do some stuff to try to, essentially the Morgan Stanley would send them a bill for all the stuff, and like the city used to just pay it. And eventually the city began to fight back and be like, it's hard to say it's actually, this improvement we made actually reduced your revenue by X, because you also tripled the price of parking. So you doing that could have also reduced the number of people using parking like it should. So, it's not as like black and white as to how much the city owes. So they fought back and now they pay a lot less, but it's still huge numbers. I don't know, like, if you're the city, like, how would you, because they still have, to like 2008 83 or something before this thing expires.
No, they've got a long time to go. I don't know. I mean, it sounded like it was just an astronomical cost to buy it back. When you look at Chicago's not in a great position financially now anyway. And there's also a whole lot happening in Chicago. Like, have you followed how there's now like a combination of various transit authorities in Chicagoland, including like the two commuter services and Pace and Metro, I believe they're called, along with the CTA. So there's just a lot happening in transportation. I don't know that you can fix this right now. And I don't know that allocating money towards street parking to reclaim this is the highest and best use of money at a time when CTA is really sort of not in a great position, or hasn't been in a great position vis-a-vis New York City and Washington, D.C., sort of like peer transit systems. So I frankly, Wes, I don't have a great solution for this. I feel like they've got other fish to fry. Do you have an easy option here? Or a
I don't
smart
have an
option?
easy one, but maybe hear me out. So this actually reminds me of when like Taylor Swift's original masters were sold to like her supposed arch enemy, right? So instead of spending like billions to try to buy them back, she ended up re-recording her old albums, like the Taylor's version thing. And people like my daughter May wanted to support Taylor, and they flat out refused to listen to the original version. So what Taylor did, in effect, was she devalued her old albums to the point where she was able to buy them back at a fraction of what they were valued at not long before.
So you want to install a whole bunch of new parking meters that are Chicago's version parking meters? Is that it?
No, but I mean, if they remove or disable or make parking unavailable, they owe money. But they don't owe money if they make the parking less attractive or less used. There are ways they could argue out of some of that compensation clause if they, do things with like land use, or like there's a lot of things they could do. If the city banded together and stopped giving money to them, I mean, like my daughter did with Taylor Swift, all of a sudden, like it doesn't make as much financial sense for like a Morgan Stanley or some other financial conglomerate to continue on. I mean, so
like
I'm not
what?
sure.
What would you see them do? How would they do that?
Like,
how do you get people to stop paying parking meters?
I mean, so congestion charging.
Though that's actually, but people are still going to go downtown and park. That was my thought too. But are they still? You're still going to have your parking meters used if you use congestion pricing,
right? But you start putting that money into making transit better and a lot of other stuff. I mean, so there, like, it's not a non-compete clause, like it's a compensation clause. So I think there are ways you could argue legally where you could start doing stuff to make people's life better. I mean, I think at the extreme example, like let's say the city built big ass parking garages everywhere and they gave that parking away for free, right? This is not something I'm suggesting, but all of a sudden, like people could be parking in the parking garages and not using the meters. The meters are no longer worth anything. The city could buy them back and then repurpose those parking garages for something else. Like that's crazy, but they're not going to do that. So what else could they do? Like there has to be something.
I see. So basically, if transit gets better, then you're reducing the relative demand to drive, is your thinking, so that people are less willing to pay for parking because they have more alternatives. Is that how you're seeing it?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, yeah. But you have to do it sort of at a whole scale where you're making that parking or what they think it's worth not worth that anymore. Maybe even, I don't know, like it's hard to figure out how this could work, but there has to be something where if you get fewer people choosing to drive, you get lower meter utilization, and all of a sudden that company's not making the money they thought they would be.
And by extension, you're suggesting then they're willing to sell at a lower price back to the city?
Yeah. The demand drops. All of a sudden, instead of being $3 billion, it's on sale. We get it for $1.5 million.
Maybe. I guess I'd be curious to see a model of just how much less willingness to pay there would be for street parking in Chicago if congestion pricing were implemented. Because congestion pricing, I would assume, wouldn't cover all of Chicago. It would cover the loop, probably, right? Or something around that.
But I think, there might be, it might even be tricky for the city to do it, because maybe if the city actually implements that it might, instigate that the trigger for the compensation clause. But if like the state's doing it, maybe not. So there might have to be some games you play to do it that way. But
I don't know. It's I mean, I respect the creativity of it.
you could even subsidize ride hailing, right? So people don't have to park; they can just get brought around, or autonomous vehicles, like your best friends.
This is called getting out of the frying pan into the fire. So we found a way to get parking back by inviting lots of cars into one of the densest areas of the whole country.
Or we'll talk about this later. Mini cars, right? You can park two of those in one spot. I don't know. Like it seems like if they were more creative, they could come up with something to try to use that same mentality that Taylor Swift did.
Yeah, I respect the analogy, the creativity of the analogy. This is, I think, the first time we've talked about Taylor Swift on the podcast. So, that's that could be fun stuff. I don't know. I actually think Chicago is interesting because it's a city that is relatively, it's pretty much all the metro area is almost entirely within Illinois, unlike DC and Philadelphia and New York City that spill out over state borders that can create a lot of complications. And Chicago actually has what I think is a really admirable ride hail fee. Do you know about this?
No.
I think it's, as far as I know, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the only city that charges an extra fee if during the daytime you're hailing an Uber or Lyft within the loop, which is, a very dense area where there's lots of transit and there's lots of congestion. They want to create a disincentive for people to use cars of any kind, including ride hail there. So, but apparently, maybe Wes, according to your logic, that's a bad idea because you want people to not
park, yeah,
to not park. I don't know.
No, because we have our papers on Uber and Lyft, and we found that they're terrible for vehicle miles traveled, but they actually are good for parking.
In terms of diminishing the need for parking, you mean?
Yeah, you don't need to supply as much parking as you think you would historically because those are an option for folks.
That's interesting. Do you know the other big, by the way, this is a paper I just saw recently, the other very clear societal benefit from ride hail?
I do, because I tried to get a hold of that paper so I could read more, and apparently my university doesn't have access to that particular journal, so I wasn't able to read it because I wanted, it's safety, right?
Drunk driving specifically,
yeah,
but safety, yeah. It seems to be clear that when Uber or Lyft enters a metro area, crash deaths decline by maybe around 5%, according to it was National Bureau of Economic Research paper. Seems to be because people who are inebriated or maybe exhausted, whatever, have another way to get around without sitting behind the wheel.
I remember when Uber first came to like Philly, like they would release the drop in like drunk driving arrests like for the months that followed. Like, so there was anecdotal, and obviously this is coming from their PR department. So it was hard to trust, but it does make some sense. But I really wanted to dig into their methods, and it seemed like they're doing a regression analysis, which isn't quite what I thought they would do. So I need to look further, but
and there's a bunch of other studies that did reach, I think, some other findings, like one found there to be a neutral effect. I don't know, but it also sort of intuitively, I think, does make sense that there would be a drop in crash deaths with ride hail. But at the same time, there's more VMT, as you found in your own research, Wes.
Yeah.
There's a drop in transit ridership, so that part is clear.
Well, in this day and age, I always have a hard time, like when I hear, especially like celebrities getting busted for like drunk driving. You're like, what are you doing? Like, there's so many options, like with Uber and Lyft or whatever else to get around. Like, it's really crazy that still happens so often.
I agree. Drunk driving is bad. I think it's about is it a third
drunk
driving is bad. You heard it here first. You heard it here first.
It's the hottest take you've ever had.
Well, as I said it, I was trying to remember. Do you know, is it a higher share of crash deaths that are attributable to drunk driving or speeding? I thought they were both around a third.
Yeah.
I don't want to be quoted.
No, they're both about a third, I believe.
And sometimes there's an overlap, I hate to say.
No, I think, like when people are drunk driving, speeding is pretty common. So they go hand in hand.
Fair enough. Let's do roundabout, shall we?
Yes.
Roundabout is the section of the podcast where Wes and I pick topics that we think are just really interesting and worth discussing. And I am going to want to talk about mini cars. But first, Wes, let's talk about the future of transit.
All right. So this starts with Denver. So 20 years ago, the Denver Regional Transit Agency, which is called RTD, was basically the poster child, at least in the U.S., for investing and building light rail transit. And they got credit for building a lot of TODs, but I would argue most of those were park and rides. Anyways, as we all know, for most every transit agency, ridership fell off a cliff during the pandemic, and perhaps in part to people working from home still and other modal options like Uber and Lyft that people have, it still hasn't recovered in many places. So recently, the CEO of the transit agency came out and they basically said they don't think it'll ever recover. And they no longer want to focus on commute trips. Instead, they want to focus on what they call high volume events like football games and other sporting events, concerts. And this one might be limited to like Denver and San Antonio, but like the rodeo. So let's start with this.
I don't know that you're going to hear like WMATA in DC or the MBTA in Boston saying we're going to serve the rodeo in the future. But keep going. Give us that Denver perspective.
No, so I want to ask, I think I've said enough here. So what do you think? Is Denver heading in the right direction here?
It's funny. I hear a lot more about events these days when I talk to transit agencies. To get back to Taylor Swift, I was speaking to the head of Vancouver's transit system a couple months ago, and he was talking about how proud he was that when she ended the Eras tour in Vancouver, they were able to basically, because of automatic trains, be able to usher like 40,000 plus people out of the stadium, with trains every 90 seconds. That was like a great win, he felt.
Yeah, no, I saw something from Melbourne, Australia, where they had the Taylor Swift concert there, and there's not a single parking space at that venue. They're able to get, I don't know what the number was, like 90,000 people in and out without any problems whatsoever.
No, I think events make sense. I mean, frankly, what's the alternative? Just like these endless, like seas of parking spots that you sometimes see in photos of Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles, for example. That's often seen as one of the worst. Yeah. And if you don't want that, and nobody really wants that, then you kind of have to do transit, because bike share is only going to get you so far and walking is only going to get you so far, ... I do also think that in terms of like the future of transit, like the commute, particularly on Mondays and Fridays, it seems that people are the working from home seems to be sticking around quite a bit. But what's interesting of what I see in talking to transit CEOs is that on a number of like neighborhood to neighborhood lines, you're hitting all-time ridership records. Do you know much about that in Denver with RTD?
No, I haven't heard that too much.
Yeah, like there's, I don't want to get this wrong, but I was talking to a leader in San Francisco who was explaining that I can't remember the name, it was a popular line that goes between Castro and the Mission that is like 125% ridership now compared to pre-COVID. Of course, lines that are going into the financial district in San Francisco are nowhere near pre-COVID. But because when people are working from home and they want to get around to other neighborhoods, the lines that are basically like not the hub and spokes lines that concentrate with peak service are quite strong, as is midday service, also weekend service. A lot of transit systems are seeing new records for weekend service. So it does. I don't know how agencies can really fight this trend with working from home being in what seems like a semi-permanent decline compared to pre-COVID. So I think you just sort of have to adapt.
So, I mean, post-pandemic, travel on transit didn't disappear. It flattened. There's so fewer commuters. There's more midday, more evening, more weekends.
And there's fewer overall trips, right? Almost everywhere.
Well, except on some lines for sure.
Sure, I meant totally across system-wide. Sorry, but keep going.
I don't know. It feels to me like they're misdiagnosing the problem. And so people still need access to places, and I don't know, at some level they stop using transit because it's not as competitive or reliable or as useful for like everyday life as it is for like commuting. So remote work might explain part of it, like, but not all of it. Like they really have like a service problem or a network problem. Yeah, I don't know. Like it feels like the problem is that we built our transit system for peak commuters and we under designed it for everyday trips.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and this, I mean, you know, this has been a critique of American transit design way before COVID, right? I remember hearing conversations about how women in particular were ill served by major transit systems because women often need to take midday trips to get to a school or get to a healthcare clinic or something like that. And that is not how the systems are not really designed to facilitate trip chaining like that. They're really designed, especially pre-COVID, to usher you into a downtown core and then get you back out to your relatively suburban home, right? To me, this is kind of a reckoning that was overdue. Even without COVID, I feel like we needed to get toward this.
I mean, so I would say instead of pivoting towards the rodeos and the Broncos games, like I want them still to focus on like frequency, like simplifying service, improving reliability, making off-peak or non-work trips an actual possibility, or trip chaining, like you're saying with, certain demographics need that more than others.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. I guess frequency and reliability may not matter as much when you're talking about events. You just sort of have a burst of service right before the big game and a burst of service afterwards. But the reality is, and you're exactly right, there's a mountain of research showing this, that outside of an exceptional circumstance like a big concert or a rodeo, what gets people to take transit is reliability, speed, and frequency of service. And that's going to be the case for going downtown at peak times. And it's going to be the case for traveling at off-peak times as well when you're never going downtown.
Well, and what I'd be worried about with this is that if they focus on big events, this could lead to them, justifying lowering their baseline services or more service cuts that are disguised as a strategy. I don't know, like a self-fulfilling prophecy of irrelevance for transit.
No, I think that's a valid concern, partly because in big cities, a big reason why a lot of people, including elected officials, support funding transit using taxpayer dollars is that it is seen as an economic development motivation, an economic development enabler. It's a way of reducing congestion by getting a lot of people off of the road at peak times. And if all you're doing is getting people to a Broncos game, I'm not sure that it's easy to sort of say, it's a nice to have, but does the economy really need this to function? And it's not as obvious that it does if you're really putting a flag down on concerts and games.
Yeah, that's the congestion piece has always been my critique of the Denver transit system. Like they clearly made the light rail system to try to, reduce traffic congestion as much as they can. Like, so if you look at a map of our rail system, it looks just like the highway map, like the same spoken hubs along the same highways. I mean, yes, there's some reasons as to why they did that in terms of right of way, but it also speaks to their goal with transit was to reduce congestion. And that's not what transit is for. Like transit can serve so many other needs and purposes, and reducing congestion maybe is one of them, but I don't think that even defines whether transit is successful or not.
And why can't it reduce congestion?
Induce demand. Like once you take those people off the road in their cars, it's going to fill up with somebody else. Like it, so I don't know if you try to judge transit by saying like, well, we didn't reduce congestion. And that's what happened in Denver. If you look at the data, traffic congestion went up after we built the system. Does that mean transit's a failure? No. Because if you look at the time it takes to get places and the number of places you can access, it's so much bigger with the transit.
So this is actually, I always found a important point that often gets misunderstood by transit advocates. I think you're right that better transit service won't necessarily reduce congestion, although advocates often claim that it will. But what it will do, from everything as I understand it, is that it allow better transit service will and higher transit ridership will in total allow more people to travel because a transit rider requires less space.
Yeah.
So if you have more people taking transit, your car usage is going to go up again. So you're going to have congestion, but the total number of people going from, metaphorically speaking, point A to point B will be higher, which means more mobility and potentially more economic development. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally do. And to be fair, Denver had to bring their thing to the taxpayers. So saying they're going to reduce congestion was something that's going to win at the ballot box. So I understand why they would even say that, even if they didn't 100% believe it.
No, I actually think this is one of these sort of like, what's the right word for it? It's like it's sort of like an open secret among transportation reformers that transit doesn't really reduce congestion, but we often hear friends and allies say that it does because they want to build overall support. And if you get, like I said, there's actually really good reasons why non-transit riders should support funding transit: fewer emissions, cleaner air, faster economic development, blah, 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 labor productivity, da, 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 da. But for just simply saying, oh, be less congestion, it gets right to where it hits people where they really care about.
Yeah.
But it's not entirely on the level, I think.
It's not. And if you are focused on solving congestion, I don't think you are building the most useful system, because then you're focused, especially in this day and age, this goes back to the original question, you're focused on the peak period, the peak hour commutes. And that is not where transit's going to be useful in the future. Like, useful transit in the future is going to serve a much bigger variety of people beyond like white collar workers downtown. Like, we built a system that serves that demographic, and that demographic doesn't need it like they used to. And we probably should have been thinking bigger from the get-go.
I think that's a good note to end on. Yeah?
Yeah. So what's your roundabout this week?
Well, you already alluded to it, man. Mini cars. Have you been in a mini car? Have you driven a mini car, Wes?
I've not been in like a key car like the ones you see from Japan. I've been in small-ish car. I think when I was in Costa Rica a few years ago, I was in something like that. But I don't think something that would be officially considered a mini car.
So yeah, you're making me think. One of my my best friend from high school drove around in what he called the Vet, which was not a Corvette. It was a Chevette. Remember the Chevette? It's like tiny. It's not very good. In fact, very breakdown prone, small car from, I guess, like the late 70s, early 80s. And this car was already old when I was in high school. But anyway, even mini cars are actually even smaller than that. For those who don't know what mini cars are, I've written a bunch of stories about them. We'll maybe have a couple in the show notes. But we're basically talking about things that are bigger than a bike or a cargo bike, and smaller and slower than a full-size car. So K cars in Japan are a good example. The Citroën Ami, or the Fiat Topolino in Europe. The Microlino, which is a Swiss car, is another one. You sort of can or don't necessarily have to include golf carts in this category, but
so would a typical one be bigger than a golf cart?
Yeah, they could be. They are about the same size or a bit bigger, but they'll go faster because golf carts in the U.S. should be capped at about 20 miles per hour. And
they're classified as a low-speed vehicle.
Actually, they're not. They're not.
Golf carts are.
No. This gets complicated. But golf carts are not low-speed vehicles because low-speed vehicles go up to 25 miles per hour. And this is a category of vehicle established by NHTSA, as a matter of fact. And they require having certain elements that golf carts don't have. I won't go into it. But golf carts kind of don't exist, according to federal law. They have no role whatsoever. But LSVs, low-speed vehicles, do exist up to 25 miles per hour. But then beyond that, and K cars and Microlinos and Citroën Amis, they go faster. They go 45 miles per hour. There's like really no federal category for them at all in the US. We basically, in this country, we have low-speed vehicles, and then we have everything else, full-size cars. And the problem is a Microlino or a K car can't pass all the set of expectations for full-size cars in the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards. So they're effectively illegal here, whereas other countries, Japan, China, Europe, they have a different category for faster small cars. And that's kind of why these sorts of vehicles are overseas, but not in the US, with one exception. And then I'm going to stop talking, which is, do you know what I'm about to say, Wes, out of curiosity? I don't know how deeply mired you are in all this.
I'm not that deep in the mini car world.
So there is a exception for collectible cars.
Yeah. So 25 years. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So there's a very hot market for these gas-powered K cars built in 1999 because those can be legally imported into the US. But if you want to get one of the newer ones that's electric and pretty sweet, snazzy and all of that, it's really hard and it's not necessarily legal, actually. So I find this to be unfortunate, but I am curious to hear what you think, Wes.
So the other reason you're bringing this up is, I mean, strangely, the president came out, was it last month?
Oh, yeah, I forgot that. I guess that's why we included it here. Good point, Wes. So to everyone's surprise, at least certainly including me, and I think you too, Wes, right? In early December, Trump announces a press conference in the White House. So, I was in Japan. I love these K cars, and I talked to Sean Duffy, the head of USDOT. We're going to make K cars built in America. These mini cars are going to be great. They're going to be all over. And Sean Duffy says, yep, we've legalized them in like 24 hours. Which, for the record, is absurd because you can't create a whole new federal classification of vehicles in 24 hours. That's like a 10-year process. So, but Trump seems to really like them. It seems like something caught his fancy when he was in Tokyo or wherever he was. So that is sort of like, that makes them a bit more topical. Thank you, Wes, for saving me from my own forgetfulness there. What do you think?
No, he was all for me. He's like, they're safe. They're great. Everyone uses them. They're great for cities. It's like, I'm watching him like, what the hell is happening? Like, this is crazy. And as far as I can tell, like the way he was talking about it, like he wouldn't allow just any K car to come over. They'd have to be made here. Is that?
Well, he had some idea that they're all going to be manufactured domestically. But if you notice, GM and Ford had very little to say about that because they're not even making sedans anymore, let alone mini cars.
No, I mean, over the course of history, we've had some bouts with like these mini cars and they've commercially not been a success.
Like the smart car, like that, which was here.
Yeah, I mean, that I think went away before the pandemic even. Like they no longer sell them or make them here.
Yes, but and there's, I think, a giant size but, which is golf carts.
Yeah.
Like golf carts they've broken out of the retirement communities and beachfront communities where they've had as their home. Now you see them in suburbs, you see them in downtowns, in places that you're not used to seeing golf carts. I'm not saying that they're outselling the F-150 anytime soon, but there's clearly, I think, a latent demand when you see this sort of upsurge in interest. Like last year, South Carolina, the entire state of South Carolina legalized golf carts on public streets, and the city of Cleveland did the same. Talk about two very different places, South Carolina and Cleveland. You're right, Wes. People often say, oh, Americans don't want smaller cars. I mean, I'm sure a lot of Americans don't, but some Americans might, I would say.
Yeah, because I could totally see them as being useful in cities.
Right.
It seems like there'd be a market for them in the U.S., in urban places. It feels like they'd be useful. I don't know. They're very popular in Japan, but I know part of the reason why they're so popular there is I believe they have a law where they tax based on engine size. Is that right? Do you know anything about that?
I think that sounds correct. And also, it's very hard to find parking space, and they require less space to park, obviously.
But I think these are
gas is more expensive
from that parking rule. Like, so if you
are
buy
they
a car,
actually? You might be right. I can't remember.
In Tokyo, if you buy a car, like somebody actually comes out to just make sure you have a space for your car, like a parking space, and they like measure it. And I think the K cars might be exempt from that, or at least, obviously they would require less space. Colorado actually, as they just recently passed the law, it doesn't go into effect till like 2028, but you can register a K car here in Colorado as of 2028.
Yeah, well, that's another controversy of the last few years. People who follow this stuff might know that the state DMVs are sort of in a weird position because K cars and K trucks in particular, a lot of people who have farms like K trucks,
Yep.
because they're more maneuverable and they're cheaper than an F-150, dot, dot, dot. They are buying them and they want to register them, but really a state DMV will register a vehicle if it is a low speed vehicle, or that is like, that and seen as and sort of qualifies as such, or it qualifies as a full size car. And the mini cars kind of are in this weird nether zone. So states like Texas and Massachusetts, I believe Georgia, were for a while like refusing to register them, even if you bought like a 30-year-old K truck. And that created a big backlash. And I think the states have backed down to allow it in. But it's sort of an interesting and very much seemingly nonpartisan issue because people of all political stripes seem to find value in these vehicles. So I find this to be a really interesting corner of car regulations because it feels like it does seem, honestly, I think, Wes, there is demand for these sorts of vehicles, at least to some degree, and regulators haven't caught up.
Well, you spent a lot of time in Europe last year, so I'm guessing you saw a ton of these over there, right?
Yeah, I was in Italy a couple times last year, and I did see a lot of them. And they're easier to park in a dense city. It's a lot easier to park. They're relatively cheap. And I wrote a whole article. I went on like a mini car safari, annoying my father in Milan as I was taking pictures of everything I came across. But they're pretty cool. Do I think everybody is going to want to use one? No. Do I think that they're better than transit? No. But do I think that they have a niche? And would I rather see a lot more people using these than, like a Hummer? Absolutely.
Oh, that's fair. And I think, at the same time, do you think this will actually happen? Do you think Trump is serious? Do you think we'll see these anytime soon here? Or is this just too many hurdles, like you were saying? Because I know these don't meet like the federal vehicle safety regulations, even though, like, yes, there's like no crumple zone and stuff like that. At the same time, they're way less likely to kill somebody else. Like the externalities of safety for these vehicles are better. Maybe less so for the occupants, but for everyone else, for sure.
Yeah, and that's what you often hear is like the safety critique is like, oh, these things are so unsafe because if you hit an SUV, you'll die. Well, that sounds like it's a problem for the SUV, which we don't regulate at all. Like this gets to the heart of the giant blind spot, no pun intended, in U.S. vehicle regulations is that they're entirely built around, and I mean this, entirely built around the safety of people inside a given car as opposed to anyone outside of that car. And one of the best things about K cars and mini cars is that they're safer for people outside. So to answer your question, let's put it this way. I don't think Trump or the Trump administration is really known for their prolonged focus on a particular pronouncement or policy goal. So I don't have a lot of confidence in them seeing this through. However, I'm optimistic or hopeful, I should say, that they handed an opportunity to Democrats and others who want to see mini cars really take root, because you can just keep asking them, hey, how's that whole mini car enablement coming? Secretary Duffy, how's that coming along? Are you working on that? Like, I'd love to see follow-ups on this. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Fiat announced that Topolino was going to come over to the US, perhaps throttled to fulfill the low-speed vehicle rules. I'm not sure, but I'm very curious how that unfolds. And maybe if you get enough OEMs or auto companies interested, perhaps that's enough of an impetus to actually move toward creating the real changes, which would be necessary, in adjusting the federal motor vehicle safety standards.
That would be a better long-term goal. But in the meantime, to be honest, like, these are kind of fun. I would like to see them. Yeah.
I would too. I think they're cool. They're fun. And in general, I'm all in favor of more diversity of transportation options, as long as those options aren't likely to kill somebody. So golf carts, cargo bikes. Now there's a big thing about e-bikes being strictly regulated in states like New Jersey. Maybe we'll talk about that in a future episode. I think mini cars are a kind of mobility that the U.S. would do well to embrace.
Hear, hear.
All right. I think we are drawing near to the end of the episode, but as always, we like to do a little toast, which we call rail drinks, because we're recording this at a happy hour time, at least happy hour for me in the East Coast, and it's getting towards it for you in Denver. And by the way, I should say before we have a drink, I'm looking forward to having some in-person rail drinks with you, Wes. We just did it in DC in January during the Transportation Research Board conference, but you and I are both going to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to give keynotes at the Safe Streets Summit in Fort Lauderdale on February 25th and 26th.
Correction, it is the Safe Roads Summit, David.
Party foul on my part.
They changed the name this year. Like this is the first time it's called the Safe Roads Summit.
Well, that's my excuse. I'm so excited about what it was last year. I'm just bringing that forward. Safe Roads Summit, forgive me. And we're going to be recording a bonus episode there too. It should be pretty fun, right?
Hopefully the audio is clear enough to work, but we'll give it a shot.
Yeah. So if you're going to be at that conference, come have a drink with us. But in the meantime, what are you drinking?
So one of the many weird things about me is when one of my sports teams is playing a big game, I try to have a drink from that location. So like when the Patriots are playing in the Super Bowl this weekend, I often will have like a Sam Adams.
Sam Adams.
Boston Lager. So Sam Adams, he's a brewer and a Patriot. He's one of the first two sports stars. When like Virginia plays in like the basketball championships, I try to find some like whiskey from Virginia. So I don't do this for every game that I watch my teams play, but on the big ones, like actually one of my high school buddies lives near me here in Denver. We'll watch a lot of the Boston sports together.
Nice.
And we'll try to find some Boston-based beers to have as we watch those events. So that's what I'm having tonight.
Did you ever go to the brewery in Jamaica Plain?
Yep.
I think they're still doing tours there. I went there years and years ago and had a bacon-flavored beer that was experimental from them. And I remember thinking to myself, it's probably good you keep this as an experiment, but I respect the creativity. And meanwhile, on my side, now it's melted a bit, but
what are you having?
You can see it here. It is an homage to a movie that came up in conversation recently, Big Lebowski. I'm having a White Russian. The Dude Abides.
The Dude Abides.
I saw that in college, thought it was really stupid, and then watched it the second time. I was like, actually, this is pretty funny. And the third time, like, okay, now I'm obsessed. And it came up in conversation just the other day. I don't even remember why, but it made me think I haven't had a White Russian in like 15 years. And, I feel like this podcast, if nothing else, gives me an excuse to have whatever drinks pop into my head. So that's what I'm going to drink.
Yeah, John Turturro's character in that, Jesus, it is one of the funniest things. Jesus. He's got there's a whole movie that he put out. It's a sequel, kind of. That movie was not as good as the original.
Character, he's not in the movie very much.
He's not in it, but he's in it just enough. I think you go too much like they did in the sequel, it doesn't work.
No, but Big Lebowski, for the young'uns who may not have seen this because it came out, 28 years ago now, watch it twice because you kind of need a little bit of time to absorb it, but it is art, is what I would say.
You make a good point. You need to watch it more than once because the first time you're like, what the frig is happening? Like, it's like John Goodman and Philip Seymour Hoffman and Steve Buscemi and like all these great actors, and it's a lot of weird stuff happening. But you need to watch it a second or third time to really get it.
And then when you get it, you really, really will get it because it gets like a fine wine. It just gets better with age. So on that note, cheers, Wes.
All right, go Pats.
Yeah, that's definitely watered down. This is the problem when you make a drink with ice before an hour-long podcast. But
my problem was I've really not had a beer that was in a bottle for such a long time. I was like, oh my God, I don't have a bottle opener. So I had to like scratch around to find one. So many beers are cans now. That's usually what I have. So this was a rarity.
I don't even know if Sam Adams makes cans. I've never seen one.
They do, yeah. They do. They were one of the last breweries to actually we're getting off topic to do that. They actually thought it tasted different, but
I mean, us off topic. I don't know. It's not like we talked about Taylor Swift 3 times on this episode. It's what we do. And that brings us to the end of another episode of Look Both Ways. Sorry, do you want to say something?
When will we be back?
Well, that's what I was about to say, Wes. We're going to be back in 2 weeks on Tuesday, February 17th at 6 p.m. Eastern. You're welcome to join us there on YouTube Live, as always. And we welcome your feedback at lookbothwayspod@gmail.com. If you have a moment to subscribe, you will definitely find out when we have new episodes coming along. And if you have a chance to tell a friend if you enjoyed the podcast, that is awesome as well. So let's, I think, end it there. And Wes, always good to see you.
Good to see you too.